This is American Common Sense. Let's talk about what's going on in the country with our host.
Hi, I'm Don Blankenship, and I'm speaking to you today from my home in Sprague, West Virginia. I've been an executive in the coal business for several decades and created a lot of jobs and dealt with a lot of government regulators and a lot of judicial issues, and have, if you will, had a lot of experiences that have not been pleasant with our government. I believe that American citizens need to be aware of the issues and to reflect upon many of the things that have been going on in our country for a long time.
So what are some of the problems?
Never in the last 60 years has the length of joblessness been this long.
Just because the U.S. is producing a lot of oil doesn't mean that we're actually going to become energy independent.
Interest payments alone in my lifetime are going to be the major driver of our national debt. And meanwhile, we have the president saying we don't have a spending problem, we have a revenue problem.
Do you think there's something fundamentally wrong with the American economic system?
No. There's something fundamentally wrong with the policies that are being followed.
I'm journalist Galen Tethrow, moderating Don Blankenship's discussions of everything from global warming to unemployment, as he explains, with supporting experts, the key controversies in seeking to save our country from politics.
This video will focus on the faltering and failing economy. For instance, you've heard of a recession. How about a regulatory recession?
We're in a reg-session, which means that this country's business community is being greatly damaged by regulations, many of which are unattainable regulations and many of which are much more easily avoided by going overseas.
Analyst Ian Murray agrees regulations stifle American creativity and jobs.
It's a massive burden on the economy. If you could just reduce regulation by about half, just cut away some of the regulations that have grown up over the past decade or so. Cut those away. It'd be the equivalent of a $1 trillion stimulus on the economy.
That's huge. In fact, it means regulations are a total drag on the economy, over $3,000 per person per year. Remember, the drag is multiplied year in, year out, compared to what would happen with those dollars freed up for the public to spend or invest. Couldn't you use that cash flow for your family? Maybe even save up for a rainy day.
The country is feeling as if there's no hope. They don't know what to do next. They see the government as against them. Many millions have lost their jobs. 47 million on food stamps, 23 million working for the government, and seeing us involved in things around the world that have no direct bearing on their lives.
Thomas Jefferson warned that companies place their loyalty where they make their money. So what do you get when you add government waste to crippling regulations? Businesses simply look elsewhere.
I've been on the boards of several Fortune 500 companies, and one of their core strategies is to export American jobs because the cost of labor overseas is fractions of what it is in this country. So they're greatly incentivized in order to live up to their commitment to the shareholders to export the jobs, and they fully ignore their Pledge of Allegiance to the country.
But don't we need all those regulations, like for the environment? I mean, we hear everywhere that we need more rules to stop global warming's destruction.
The air, the water, the soil, hundreds of scientists saying tonight it is visual proof of global warming and what we all have to do next.
So why don't they tell us the actual temperature readings haven't gone up in 16 years? Perhaps we're not burning up. Chris Skates, author of the novel Going Green, who also serves as an industrial chemist, says the regulations were once useful, but now we're only harming ourselves.
We have created this huge bureaucracy, the Environmental Protection Agency, that feels like it's their mission to come up with new regulations without end. So what we have in a lot of our coal industry particularly, and it affects nuclear as well, is the death by 1,000 green cuts.
And Blankenship wonders why many critics attack our own clean country, yet say nothing about the world's greatest polluter, China.
The use of coal in the United States has gone down. The thing that most people miss is that the Chinese burn more coal than the rest of the world combined. And if you go back about 30 years ago, China and the U.S. both used about 900 million tons of coal. But today the Chinese are approaching 4 billion and the United States is still at 900 million. And it's interesting because everybody talks about economic growth, that you can tell whether you're getting economic growth by looking at electricity generation. This country's industrial electricity generation has hardly grown at all since the passage of the Clean Air Act back in 1990. And the Chinese continue to grow electricity generation and are building 20 or 30 coal-fired power plants per year. So it's quite ridiculous to think that you're going to lower the temperature of the earth by reducing carbon emissions in the United States when they've quadrupled in China in that same time frame.
Your mental images of coal may be that it makes the air and water dirty, but today's American plants don't put out even a hint of smoke. And has no one mentioned to you that we have the most massive coal reserves in the world? Did you know that we have way more than China and double what the Russians have? Wisely using U.S. coal could help provide more jobs across the country, especially in devastated places like coal-rich West Virginia and Kentucky.
Yeah, I have a degree in business administration from the University of Pikeville, and I've been searching for almost a year for a career that lets me use that degree. But with the recent layoffs, like I was saying before, there are hiring freezes.
And unless current policies change, economists say long-term unemployment will remain abnormally high for 10 more years. That means a decade with millions out of work for 6 months or more. Shouldn't we be upset at this reality? And so much more.
I think old people should be angry because their Social Security is at risk. I think young people should be angry because their future's at risk. I think people who are very pro-patriotic Americans should be angry because the country that they grew up in and they're patriotic toward is being destroyed.
Social critic Oz Guinness says perhaps part of the problem is that we've so focused on diversity and world citizenship that we've simply forgotten what it means to be uniquely American.
The rot in many ways started in the 60s because one of the things that went along with ideas like postmodernism was the notion of civic education. In other words, for schools and for immigrants, people were taught what it was to be American. And you can see with the collapse of civic education, now it's relatively easy to become an American, but hardly anyone knows what it is to be American. There's no melting pot. There's no Americanization.
Guinness quotes Lincoln in calling these trends a free people's suicide. And is it possible that members of Congress, the President, and Supreme Court justices themselves don't know what it is to be faithfully American?
And they forget that they swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and then they immediately begin to change it.
And whatever happened to limited government? Who even remembers that the Constitution, as written, strictly curtails federal intervention in farming, manufacturing, and even medicine? Isn't that involvement supposed to be for the states and individuals to decide, not distant bureaucrats in Washington? And why do we spend trillions to send our young men and women abroad to police the world for democracy?
This country itself was not founded on democracy. It's a republic. It's the reason you have a Senate. You don't just have a House. And basically, they've lost their way. Their heads gotten too big, and they think they're too important, and they've forgotten why they went to Washington.
Yes, our country faces many problems, and the situation is dire in many ways. But there is hope. And now that you have the big picture, continue to follow us at SaveTheCountry.com and DonBlankenship.com.
We are happy to have provided this information to you today. If you have further interest in our messages, you should check the website SaveTheCountry.com or DonBlankenship.com, and you may also find videos on YouTube. So we appreciate your listening to what we have to say and look forward to any feedback that you might want to provide to us through these websites.